There are really three ways that you can interact with oils, and smell, I think, is the best. Like, it's super efficient. Some people like to diffuse. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you think about it, if you put something under your nose, like within 3 to 7 breaths, you'll smell it. So if you're diffusing it in the air all the time, a lot goes to waste. You don't necessarily need that. And people don't realize, like, nose cells are brain cells. So when it goes through the nose, it goes directly to the brain. And you can even use it in even more targeted ways. Like, there's a whole branch of chiropractic called functional neurology, where they're literally smelling through different nostrils or topically applying on different parts of the brain to kind of balance the two hemispheres. So right hemisphere and left hemisphere do different things.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. According to the American Psychological Association survey, more than 3 in 4 adults in the U.S., at 77%, say the future of our nation is a significant source of stress. And this is up significantly from 2019, when 66% of adults said the same. Since we're experiencing more stress now, and the sources of stress do not seem to be going away, I wanted to focus today's podcast on addressing stress. My guest is Jodi Cohen, who is a best-selling author, award-winning journalist, functional practitioner, and she has a unique understanding about essential oils. She has helped over 50,000 clients heal from brain-related challenges, including anxiety and insomnia. In this episode, we discuss how to address stress, including how to use essential oils for stress management and which ones are best to use. This and much more on today's episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast. Jodi, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, it's always so fun to connect with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're talking about stress today because who isn't stressed right now? And I feel like women in particular, we tend to take on a lot. And so we can be more susceptible to the negative effects of stress. Of course, stress is a normal part of life, but when it overwhelms us, that's when we have a lot of problems, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny, like, my whole life, people are like, oh, you just need to, like, be less stressed. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, go to yoga, come home, and the laundry still needs to get done. The kids still need to get fed. The house still needs to get clean. It's not like I'm giving up my life, So that always, it would always actually make me more stressed when people would tell me that. So I'm really excited when I finally kind of figured out, like, oh, wait a minute, I can keep everything busy in my life. I don't need to quit my job. I don't need to, put my kids up for adoption. I can just kind of gear shift my own physiology. Like, stress is a hormonal response, right? And if we can figure out how to calm that cascade, then we can just change how we respond to things, but we don't need to change all of the external factors in our life. And so that's what I'm really excited to share.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. What have you found to be really helpful?
Well, it's really interesting. So stress basically is triggered by your nervous system and your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, right? And so your nervous system is designed to keep us safe. It controls all of your automatic functions that you don't think about: breathing, heart rate, immune function, digestion, detoxification. And it really has two gears. If you feel like you're in danger, it kind of shifts into what's known as the sympathetic branch of your nervous system. And resources are allocated towards survival. You don't even have to think about it. Your heart starts to breathe. Your heart starts to beat faster, so you have more blood. Your breathing increases, so you have more oxygen. Your blood is routed to arms and limbs, so you can either fight back or flee. And it kind of shuts down everything that's not critical to survival, including digestion, detoxification, immune function. And then what's supposed to happen is the danger passes, you recalibrate, and you kind of shift back into the safety gauge, which is known as the parasympathetic branch. Sadly, most of us stay stuck in kind of stress. We watch the news and we don't feel safe. We have a conflict in person or online and we don't feel safe. And so we're always kind of in that fight or flight state. And what's interesting is that you can shift your physiology. You don't need to change other people's minds. You don't need to change, the Supreme Court. You can just kind of turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. And the way to do that is the longest nerve in the body that most people have never heard of. It's called your vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10. And it literally connects the body to the brain, brain to the body. And understanding kind of the physiology helps you understand how to gear shift. So it starts back of the head because it starts at the base of the brain. Splits is most accessible behind the ear, right there, kind of on the mastoid bone. And then it winds through the throat, the heart, the lungs, every organ of digestion and detoxification. And this is what deep breathing practices do. This is what yoga does. This is what, like, gagging yourself with a tongue depressor, gargling. There are all these ways that you can stimulate the vagus nerve by kind of activating the organ it's touching, and then gear shift into parasympathetic. The bummer is that a lot of people don't do it, even though they know, like, oh, I know I can deep breathe. For whatever reason, it feels too hard. They know they can gag themselves with a tongue depressor. For whatever reason, it's unpleasant. They know they can Wim breathe. They know they can cold plunge. All of these things, they're kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like, I know I can eat vegetables, but the muffin maybe seems a little bit better. So what I figured out is that oils, for whatever reason, even if you won't deep breathe or, kind of do yoga, you will be able to take an oil, flip it, and put it kind of right there, which is the most accessible point of the vagus nerve. And people actually do that. And that's what I love, is if you can make it, we're both moms with kids. There were so many things we asked our children to do. They probably never cleaned their room, but they can remember to, put their dishes in the sink. So, like, okay, when you're putting the one less thing, we'll take what we can get. And that's kind of what I think, is that people, once they start realizing, like, oh, I can use an essential oil like an acupuncture needle, and I'll get into how that works, they can do that. And this is easy. You can carry it in your pocket. It's a smell. Smell is actually our safety sense. We smell food, we smell water, we smell predator odor, we smell fire. It's what keeps us safe. And so, unlike the other four senses, it actually has most immediate access to the brain. It goes directly to the amygdala. And so there's a way that you can kind of create a smell memory. You can smell something, you can topically apply it. And then the next time you're in stress, even just smelling it, it like sends, the body remembers. It sends that signal for the body to kind of calm down and feel okay, so that you're kind of the calm in the storm, right?
Amazing. And I know that unfortunately a lot of people are looking for that quick fix. What can I do right away? I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time for the yoga class or
Yeah.
to meditate or to do these things. And I totally get it. I know we're busy too. But like what you're talking about, it is so quick what you can do. So let's talk about some of the essential oils that you love the most. And I know you have your own essential oil line. There are a lot of different places. So I definitely want to dive into essential oils, because they're out there. People can get them pretty easily. But let's talk about your favorite essential oils for stress.
Yeah, and just if people are unfamiliar with essential oils, they're basically the concentrated essence of plants. So you think about, you go to the lavender field, you pick the lavender, you put it in the vat of boiling water, the vapor rises, oil and water don't mix, so oil goes on one side, water, which becomes a hydrosol, goes on the other. And oils are kind of the immune system of plants. They're really, people don't realize that pharmaceutical drugs are derived from plants. Like aspirin is white willow bark. Valium is valerian root. All of these pills are really kind of a derivative of what we're already finding in nature. And so plants have a lot of healing medicinal properties. And when you concentrate them, you're just concentrating that plant. So if you've never played with oils, lavender is a great place to start. it is kind of an all-purpose blend, or oil. You can use it on sunburns. You can use it on your skin. You can add it to an Epsom salt bath. You can kind of put a drop on a cotton ball and put it in your pillowcase. It's relaxing. It helps you sleep. That's like, a really good place to start. Orange is another really good one, especially if you tend to be anxious or you have a child who maybe needs a little help focusing. All of the citrus oils, which are found in kind of the peel of the fruit, are very light in molecular weight, which means that they kind of get into your system really quickly and have that uplifting effect. So if you're having, just a day where getting off the couch feels like a lot, smelling orange can help.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. The Spa Doctor skincare products, we use some of the citrus essential oils because of that, because of the lightness. Most people enjoy the scent of citrus, right? And it is that that light and uplifting effect that people have when they are using their skincare products and they're putting it on, and what is that smell? What do I? And we use other ones as well, but that is one of my favorites. And so, but we do have to be careful with, we use a specific type of citrus essential oil that doesn't have the photosensitizing effect.
Well, that's what people don't realize is that if it's from, oh gosh, I'm having a hormonal brain moment. There are two kinds. Oh, but I know what it is. If it's cold, if it's pressed, then it's photosensitive. If it's steam distilled, it's not. So that's what people don't realize. Yeah, not all citrus oils are photosensitive.
Right. Yes. So we're very careful about that. And all right. So, and then those are some great ones for de-stressing. And I'm glad that you really explained what essential oils are as well, because I think a lot of people don't realize what exactly they are and also how concentrated they are. And so what that means too, is you also want them to be very clean. And that's something we're just absolutely sure about at Spa Doctors. We only get organic essential oils because we know that it is, when you concentrate something from nature, if there are pesticides on it, you're concentrating the natural actives of it and the components we want, but you're also concentrating the pesticides if they're not organic.
No, I 100% agree. I only use organic, and some things like frankincense, for example, if it's in nature, it's wild crafted, it's pretty safe. But yeah, that's a really valid point.
Yeah. Okay. And so what are some other tips on essential oils, using essential oils? They are so concentrated. So a little bit goes a long way. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting. There are really three ways that you can interact with oils, and smell, I think, is the best. Like, it's super efficient. Some people like to diffuse. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you think about it, if you put something under your nose, like within 3 to 7 breaths, you'll smell it. So if you're diffusing it in the air all the time, a lot goes to waste. You don't necessarily need that. And people don't realize, like, nose cells are brain cells. So when it goes through the nose, it goes directly to the brain. And you can even use it in even more targeted ways. Like, there's a whole branch of chiropractic called functional neurology, where they're literally smelling through different nostrils or topically applying on different parts of the brain to kind of balance the two hemispheres. So right hemisphere and left hemisphere do different things. For example, anxiety is often the right hemisphere. The frontal lobe is kind of your cognition, executive function area. And so if the right frontal lobe is overactive, you feel anxious, you're ruminating, you're overthinking. And so the way to kind of calm that mechanism is to do something to stimulate the left frontal lobe, like smelling through the left nostril. Even though right brain typically controls left body, right nostril goes directly to right brain, left nostril goes directly to left brain. So if you take your thumb, plug right nostril, smell under left nostril, you're stimulating this area, you're balancing the two hemispheres. And if you're prone to anxiety attacks or panic attacks, that is kind of an immediate off switch. And it works incredibly well. I used to have, and it's interesting because it's almost like a muscle, right? Like, the more you weight lift or run or do any activity, the easier it gets. The more you train yourself to inhale through the left nostril when you're overwhelmed, the less overwhelmed you get.
Right. And I know that you have, you definitely understand overwhelm and stress, and you've been through a lot personally. I know something. I think sometimes people, they think, oh, well, what does she know? She doesn't understand the stress that I'm under. But you've been through quite a bit, so you know stress.
Yeah, so my well, I'll share. My husband was bipolar. He attempted suicide about 10 years ago, which is how I started the company, because once I found him, saved him, and moved him into treatment, I kind of shut down and nothing seemed to be helping. And the kids were 5 and 7 at the time, so they kind of needed a mom. And a friend who was into oil said, you have been so chronically stressed, which means so high cortisol, that all of the remedies that you're ingesting probably aren't really getting into your system because you're probably so inflamed. And so why don't you try oils? You can inhale them. We know you can topically apply things from like hormonal creams, nicotine patches. So I tried them and I just was so desperate. I just kind of made up my own remedies. I started combining them in interesting ways to support the adrenal glands and sleep. And it worked really well. And so that I was doing that, just kind of continuing to play with it. I launched a company, Vibrant Blue Oils, and it was doing well. And then, a worse thing happened. My husband was driving my son and his three friends to the other side of the state to go whitewater rafting and got into a car accident. And my son and two of his friends died. And then there was, not only this was the week before my daughter started high school, there were all these legal things. It was the most intense experience that I've ever gone through and ever hoped to go through. And there were days when I really, it really felt too much. Like I really was like, how am I even going to get up today? But I had a daughter that needed me because I was it. So I had to figure it out. And it's amazing. Like necessity is really the mother of invention, and grief is intense. It's physically intense, and there are nights when I would wake up and it was almost like a Charlie horse in my heart. Like I just couldn't breathe. And I'm like, what can I do? And oils, it's so shocking when you kind of think something might work and then you try it and it works. Like if you have crazy period cramps and you're like, okay, I'm gonna just try this, and then suddenly you don't, like keeping that one. So it was a lot of using myself as a crash test dummy. But that, you know, if I could rewind time and undo this, I would, of course. But since I don't think that's an option, I'm kind of choosing to live in wasn't it interesting that now I know that these really work when you really need them?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I know that, I mean, I can only imagine the how challenging that was for you during that time. And it's amazing though that you had this tool to help you through,
Yeah.
and that you already had this knowledge to support you in that. Of course, you had community and other people around you, which also is really beneficial and helpful too. I'm sure you had a lot of support during that time. And so what are some of the essential oils that you found to be particularly helpful during that challenging time?
So the one that I use the most is our blend. It's clove and lime. It's called Parasympathetic. And basically, I've been slightly obsessed with the parasympathetic nervous system for decades. I was an athlete. I did yoga. They'd always talk about it, and it always seemed hard to kind of access. Like I love Tatis Karazian, but he's like, gag yourself with a tongue depressor. Get that? Like, who wants to do that? Terrify yourself. Like all of the ways to activate it seemed kind of yucky and unpleasant. And so I found this research. There was this New York neuroscientist named Kevin Tracy who was surgically implanting a pacemaker-like device kind of behind the ear lobe on that point where the vagus nerve is most accessible. It was two surgeries, actually. One was there and one was kind of in the chest for the battery. And he was using it to stimulate the vagus nerve at that point. And the research was so successful that the FDA approved this for epilepsy, migraines, and depression. And it's funny because people think of the parasympathetic nervous system as like calming, sedative, and I originally thought like, oh, lavender, chamomile, calming oils. It wasn't until I saw that research that I realized oils can also be very stimulatory, meaning that like if you were to say put some on your arm, it might turn red, it might feel hot. If you do that, oil and water don't mix. You would just take any cooking oil in your kitchen and dilute it. and that would calm it down. But I started playing with stimulatory oils and testing all of them. And clove, actually, out of all of the essential oils, clove has this one constituent called eugenol that is miraculous for everything, for like inflammation, antimicrobial, antibacterial. Clove actually used to be used in dentistry, and it makes sense to me because it's kind of like the panacea for all, it kind of neutralizes everything bad, but it's also stimulatory. And yet, the reason I like oil blends, single oils are great, don't get me wrong, but when you combine them, kind of like what the alchemy you're doing in your products, it's almost like you bring out the best in everything and they synergize. So clove has medium-sized molecules, which means that if you were to apply it, it would maybe take 20 minutes to get through the skin. Lime and the citrus oils are very fast acting and they're very small molecules. So when you combine them and then dilute it, you can put it on this point and it literally is like a gear shift, like flipping the light. Like all of a sudden you shift from kind of overwhelm to calm. And what I always knew that, there were physical benefits. It turns on digestion, it turns on detoxification, it allows blood flow to go back to the core. What I didn't realize was when you think your safety, is at stake, it impacts your ability to think and to process information. It literally shuts down your access to your prefrontal cortex, your cognitive function, kind of keeps you stuck in the amygdala place of fear. So think about when, like the reaction to the news lately, like we're all kind of reactive and overwhelmed, and nothing good comes from that. Like no good, like you can't really delineate and think through problems and options. So there was this one horrible moment. My dad wound up dying 6 months to the day after Max. But before, this was right around when legal stuff was getting confusing and uncertain. And one wrongful death attorney called me. And, these wrongful death attorneys are pretty aggressive. They're not like, your estate planning attorneys. And he had a lot to say and none of it was good. And he's like yelling at me. And I'm with my dad. He's screaming at me on the phone. He's like, you have to do this now. And I'm like, oh my God. I just knew, I'm like, I am flooded. I can't deal with this. So I hung up on him and went outside and was like, I am so fight or flight. Like, I don't even feel like it's kind of like, what's the best next step? I was like, I just need to go outside and I just need to move. Like maybe if I move, I can calm down. And so I was taking my parasympathetic blend and literally bathing in it, like putting it on every 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden this weird thing happened. I was like, wait a minute. Like, he's saying these things, but that doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't even think that's true. But, it's possible that that's not what's going to happen at all. Like, it could be all these other things. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I could get a second opinion. I could ask other people. My friend Sarah actually is really good at this. I can ask her about this. And all of a sudden, all these possibilities occurred. Like my therapist always says that the opposite of I don't feel safe is I have choices, because if you have choices, you're empowered and suddenly you can make a different choice. And so what I love about the parasympathetic blend in particular, yes, it turns on physical health, but it also kind of turns on calm and allows you to get out of that back to the wall, oh my God, I'm going to possibly die situation to wait a minute, maybe, we don't know, but I could also like get more information or get a second opinion, or maybe this best case scenario could actually happen. And ironically is by doing that, by kind of training myself not to go into reaction, not to go into panic, but to go into kind of curiosity and pause. There were two legal suits, and actually they kind of played out in the best possible way, in ways that, if I had to kind of make a best case scenario, given kind of the situation that happened, it worked really well. And then it also relationships are tricky because sometimes people, they hear one thing, like my relationships have improved, my business has improved because it's just allowed me to be much more of a cool cucumber. Like even, my teenage daughter, like anyone who has teenagers, like, oh my God, the hormones, it's like crazy making sometimes, and they come in like, and you're just like, oh, I see what's happening. I'm just not going to respond. I'm going to let you have your moment and just be compassionate and kind, and it goes better.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I know that women are typically the decision makers for their families, so the household decision makers, especially when it comes to things like healthcare and food choices. A lot of the things in the home, women make decisions about. And I feel that if you can make decisions from a place of calm, you're way better off. If
Oh
you're
my
making
God.
decisions from a place of fear, there's a good chance you're going to look back and go, maybe that wasn't the best decision, because we just don't have that rational sense. And also, as women, we have this great ability to have this gut instinct, that intuition. And if we're moving from a place of fear, our intuition just isn't as good. It just isn't there, because our brain is working differently, because we're in that sympathetic dominant state, that fight or flight state. And so we just can't make those gut decision kind of things. And so it's great that you talked about that and you gave that example, so women can understand, hey, when you're in that place and you're getting things thrown at you, take a moment and step back from it. And using essential oils like yours, your blend that you're talking about, taking some deep breaths, even just taking a moment, taking a time out. It's just like, hey, I need a time out.
Outside without your phone. Yeah, I know. And it's really amazing. And like, that is literally my strategy. It's kind of like calm myself down as much as I can, kind of try to get into my heart and out of my head. And then I don't need to, I used to joke, it's like hiking in the fog, right? You can just see the next few steps. You can't see the whole trail, but just saying like, what is the logic? Like, what can I do next? Like, it doesn't, like my to-do list this week, my daughter's going to go to college and I have all these things to do. I'm like, it's okay. I'm just chipping away at the iceberg. Like, what's my next step?
Yeah, absolutely. This is so helpful. Any other things that people need to know about essential oils for stress management, or really just safe practices when it comes to essential oils?
My main safe practice, I really, if you're working with a practitioner and you're working on like parasites or things like that, and you want to ingest them and you're working with someone, great. I wouldn't say like go drink oregano at home, because I think it's so good at killing. It can kill the good things along with the bad. So I think if you're just smelling or topically applying, you're pretty safe. Definitely pick organic, definitely dilute. I try to, it's funny, one summer we went blackberry picking and picked so many blackberries and made all this jam. I don't ever need to make jam again. It's still in my freezer. So now, I'm like, I don't know that I'm the do-it-yourself girl. Like I don't make my own bread. I don't really eat gluten, but my kids do. So, but I'm like, if you're worried about how to do it, I have done for you, remedies at Vibrant Blue Oils. And if you want to make your own, I put all my recipes in my books. So I feel like there are a lot of ways that you can use oils to kind of support the body's natural function, like lymph drainage. Most people, avoid toxins. So your products are amazing because they're super clean and super helpful. And I do think that, what you're doing, you are actually helping with drainage. As long as people are sleeping, calming their stress response and draining, I think that goes a long way. And so I think oils can be really supportive in that way, and clean products like what you offer.
Awesome. Thank you, Jodi. Well, tell everyone where they can go to learn more about you and your essential oils and your book.
Oh yeah, thank you. If you actually, I have a free chapter of the book that goes more into the, fight or flight response. It's, if you go to boostthebrainbook.com/gift, you can download that and grab that. And then you can always find me at vibrantblueoils.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Jodi. So great catching up with you.
Thank you. Always fun.
Thank you for listening to the Woman's Doctor podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share this with the women in your life and rate and review this show.